Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Notes from Chicago. Today, I am so excited. We have photographer and creator of Doorways of Chicago, Ronnie Frey. Ronnie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to start with a question that we ask every guest, and that is, what do you love about Chicago?
I love that it's a huge, bustling city, but then like you go into the neighborhoods and it feels like you're living in a small town. I just love that. I lived in Andersonville for many years, and I just never got sick of living in that neighborhood. It's just so fun talking to people and meeting people on the street. And so I'm a water sign. My birthday's in July, and I love that we're on the lake, huge Lake Michigan, of course, and then also to have this amazing river flowing through our city right in the middle of it is just pretty special. I mean, it's just so cool. Every time that I go down to the river, I just pinch myself like I live here. And I love the friendly Midwestern attitude that a lot of people have. And then, of course, architecture and stunning doorways, an endless supply of that for me
Yeah.
to capture.
Yeah, so that's a good segue then into Doorways of Chicago. So Doorways of Chicago is an Instagram account that you started, I believe, during COVID, but let's talk about that. And just really does an incredible. I love the photos. I love the photos. They're so beautiful, and I
Thank
love
you.
seeing Chicago shown and such. Like all the there's Chicago's beautiful, and I love seeing all that beauty displayed there. Talk to me about when you started it and what inspired you to start the account.
So I really started a couple years before the pandemic, um, but it was really just a pastime. I guess it's still a pastime, but I I'm an interior designer by trade, so I've designed a lot of really cool doorways in my life, interior and exterior, and I've just always loved the double meaning that a doorway can have, or the philosophical meaning, like a doorway into another chapter of your life, or a portal into meditation. And what I didn't realize until a few years in was that this hunt for doors and really cool things to capture for me is my meditation. Because as you know, the key is to turn your thinking off. And so I would go out exploring for 4 to 6 hours in neighborhoods and come home and feel like I went on vacation. So I just kept saying, why do I feel this way? And then I realized one day that I'm not thinking, so it's my meditation. And so it has that extra layer to it for me, which is really cool. And then I was really inspired by an account on Instagram called Doorways of Paris. And it's still there, but sadly she doesn't post any longer. But all her content is still there. And I don't know if you've ever seen the doorways in Paris, they're just spectacular, but very colorful. And I noticed that we don't have a lot of color here, so it was really interesting to me to see the contrast and the difference in our doorways and their doorways. And so after amassing probably a couple thousand photos of doors, I decided to start my own account. I was posting them on my personal account first. And I'm like, this needs its own account. So I started that. And then in the pandemic, um, I really was so happy to have this pastime, or this thing that I did by myself anyway. So I had my best friend and I lived together for 5 years, but we had a really small apartment, and we drove each other nuts during during the pandemic. So I would just go out and like leave the house for a day and get my alone time that way.
When you first launched the account, what was the immediate response?
It started to grow rapidly, and I just couldn't understand. I mean, I didn't even know I could take a photograph, okay? But since I'm trained in one art, I really have realized that, you know, you train your eye in one thing, it can overlap into something else. And so, my composition and just the way I take the photos, I just do it naturally. My roommate was my biggest fan, and I almost had 800 followers, and I would get all excited. And she would just shake her head and roll her eyes, and I'm like, "What are you doing that for?" And she said, "This is going to be huge." And I said, "It is?" She goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, why do you say that?" And she said, "Because I've lived in Chicago all my life. I've walked up and down all these streets. I've never seen these buildings the way you show them. And then I said, okay, well, I still don't get it because I just snap a picture in 2 seconds. And she said, that's the whole idea. You have an eye for this. So it's really cool to have developed or figured out that, you have another talent, so to speak, later in life and one you had no idea you could do. And so it's just really so much fun. And I love it that it resonates with people. And I think that the reason it grew fast is because everyone was hungry during the pandemic for information and, just human connection. And I like to post the history about what I'm showing when it exists. And I just think that people ate that up. So I had 5,000 followers in March of 2020. And by August of that year, I had 10,000 followers.
Oh, wow. Was there a specific, post or photo or point at which you knew beyond your roommates' encouragement and confirmation, at which you knew like I really have something here and people are really responding to this?
Um, I'm sure that there was. I can't really recall, but I remember though there's some Instagram accounts that repost things, and there's one called Archaeology, and I love those women. They're in Indiana, and they started reposting my posts, and they give credit. Of course, it's not a imposter type of an account, but I just remember when they posted my first photo, I got like 200 followers that day. And so then I was like, okay, if 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 this keeps happening, like I have something here. So yeah.
When you started and you were doing those 4 to 6 hour walks, how did you decide where to go?
I would hear about, how historical a neighborhood is. Like for instance, before I ever went to Pullman, I heard about the history there and I had seen some photos. And so I just made a point to go there and, and a lot of times I would specifically say I'm going to this neighborhood or haven't been there yet. And not really realizing that today, I've got half of the Chicago neighborhoods covered in the book. So, and also just kind of to dispel that myth about how dangerous Chicago is. I just hate that. I mean, I've
Yeah.
lived here for 14 years, and knock on wood, I've never been in any kind of a compromising situation. And I go to neighborhoods where you could possibly get into trouble. But I just start talking to people, and people are amazing all across the city, and I really have dispelled the fear of going into a neighborhood that might be considered dangerous or whatever. Also, I got a lot of compliments on my Instagram account from people saying, you're one of the only Chicago photographers that just doesn't show just downtown. And I really liked that because, Chicago is obviously much more than our downtown, even though we love downtown. But, the neighborhoods are the fabric of this city. And I love capturing that. And I love finding even things that are mundane looking and elevating them into art with photography. And so I'll walk down alleys, and I found the coolest thing. I found a vintage sign in an alley in Bronzeville that says, "Please, no pissing here. Please order."
Oh my God.
It's bright red, and it's got the coolest like mechanics car mechanic font, car
Yeah,
mechanic sign font, and it's one of my top sellers. I
that's
just
so
snapped a picture of
funny.
it. Yeah, it's fun.
Do you have neighborhoods that you go back to again and again? Do you have any? I'm not going to ask you to choose a favorite neighborhood because I think it's an
I
unfair
always,
question.
yeah, I always tell people you can't ask me my favorite neighborhood, nor can you ask me my favorite door. um, I love Hyde Park. I go to Hyde Park as often as I can. The architecture there is just stunning, and also every neighborhood has its own personality. I just love the feeling there. And also Pullman, I love to go to Pullman. Um, Wicker Park and Old Town are just gorgeous neighborhoods to wander around in. I have tours in both of those neighborhoods, so I'm there a lot. And then Rogers Park is another one that you might not know, but if you don't go there, like the architecture there is just really amazing. So, and all over the city though, and I just, I'm sure I have photos in some of the neighborhoods that aren't in the book, but I really haven't hit every single one of them yet. So that's on my radar to do them all.
Is there a neighborhood that you haven't been to that you want to go to? Is there one maybe like that's next on your list?
Yeah, I have never been to Englewood, and I would like to go there. And I do kind of uh, explore around in the south neighborhoods, but there's some like Flossmoor. I really want to like finish the whole south side.
Yeah. Talk to me about the tours. When did things go from like I have an Instagram account to I have a business, and like kind of the different offshoots of that.
So 2021, I had a tour app for your phone, like self-guided tours, approach me and say, we'd like for you to design a tour on our app. Would you be interested? And so I had kind of always wanted to do walking tours, but never knew anything about them. And so I thought, well, this might be a good way to try. So I designed my Old Town tour on their app. And then, I have all these routes and I had all the photos and I had all the history. So it was kind of a no-brainer. And I did that. And then I said to myself, you know what? I could try this in person and just see what happens. So that's what I did. And I started, back then you had to have 10,000 followers to be able to put a link in your story. Now anyone can do it. But I hit the 10,000, like I said, in August of 2020. So in spring of 2021, I started my first tour in person and I started just linking it in my stories. And it started to sell out.
Oh, wow.
And I'm really passionate when I give a tour, so that's one of the things that comes out a lot in reviews. And so I just love geeking out over this stuff, and I think it's just so fun to lead people through the neighborhoods and see the smiles on their face, and also the wonder when they hear a story that they never heard before. So it's super fun.
Is it tourists or is it people who live here?
That's both. And also I've had a lot of people from around the world on my tours, and that's always really fun too.
That's so cool. I have a question about a specific photo that you took recently or that you posted recently. So there's a photo right now on your Instagram feed. It must be from the past couple of days. It is this really beautiful shot and it looks like it's an aerial shot of Millennium Park and then the skyline behind it. I have a lot of iPhone shots of this scene, but from the ground, like being out at the band, like being out on the lawn, like watching a show or something, and it's just breathtaking when you're down on the ground. I'm wondering but it's like the shot and the way you got it was so nice because it's zoomed out and backed up. I'm wondering how did you get that shot?
Is that the one with all the pride colors
Yes,
on the
it's and
building?
it's so yeah, and it's so
So
that is a breathtaking scene anyway. But when it's lit up like that and it has all the colors, it's so cool.
right. So I fly a drone, and I just got a new one, and the camera that's one of the first pictures I took with it, and I could kind of tell it was going to be pretty spectacular. But then you never know until you get home and actually look at the photo. But it's so crystal clear, and I'm just really, really happy with this drone, and I can't wait to take. I use my drone a lot to go up and take like details on the top of buildings architecturally that you'd never be able to see from the street, and people love that too. So um, I'm really, I'm really excited about that photo. It's really kind of gone viral, and I mean it's just kind of cool to think that you can show off your city from the air. I love that. My eye in the sky, I call it.
It looks great. I mean, that photo is really just very very summer in Chicago. Like really
Yeah,
captures, I think,
right,
like oh my God, the city's so beautiful.
right. And it's really it's not fully dark yet, so you get that dark blue sky in the background. And it's just great. I mean, I'm really happy with it. I can't wait to go again.
Let's talk a little bit about the book, The Doors of Chicago Coffee Table book. How did that come about?
Fun story about this. I have a work studio in the Fine Arts Building. That's where I am right now. And I've been in here for 2.5 years. And the Fine Arts Building also published a book about a year before mine. And the publisher, Trope Publishing, they really do great, amazing Chicago books, a lot of drone photography books. And they have several, and I bought one of their books like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago even. And as I'm looking at this book, I said, "Oh, I would love to be in one of their books someday." And so they lost for the Fine Arts Building book. They lost the rights to use a picture of our Venetian art outdoor court here, called the Venetian Court. And they noticed that I had one on my Instagram account, and then they noticed that I was a tenant in the building. So they just reached out in a direct message, actually, and asked if they could use the photo. And I wasn't going to get paid for it, but it's going to be a full page photo, and I would get photo credit. So here I am. Yeah, I get to be in a trope book. So I gave them the photo, and then in order to do that, I had to have the girl's email address. So when she sent her email, it was kendra@trope.com. And I was like, "Wow, this is trope." And so then I said to myself, "Dude, you should pitch this idea to them, because you just never know." And because of the old inner saboteur, we all have it, I guess. I'm really learning to not have it, though. I just don't listen to it anymore. But anyway, it said, they're not going to want to do your book. Are you crazy? Blah, blah, blah. And then I really just said to myself, what is wrong with you? Like, just pitch it. If they say no, they say no. So I pitched it to them, and they wrote back almost immediately and said, "You were actually reading our mind." And so I was like, wow. And I still had to go through the process of submitting the proposal. And they asked for 10 photos, and I sent them 10. And it was 2 weeks. And then they asked for 20 more. So I sent them 20 more. It was another 2 weeks. And then they said, "How many photos do you have?" And I said, "How many do you need?"
Oh my, yeah.
Because I had thousands, right? And they said, "Well, we need about 200 or 300 to narrow it down to, if it was first going to be 90 or 100 photos." And so I sent them, I remember it took me 2 weeks. I went through my whole, since 2018, all of them, and, did some editing and sent them 400 photographs. And then it was a month. And I was just talking to some of my friends going like, "I pitched this book. I don't know if it's going to happen, but yeah, it's going to happen." Started manifesting it. And then they wrote back and said, "We're really excited to let you know that we want to do the book." So, I mean, it was just such a cool moment. And the actual owner of the publishing company saw it after a while, because, he didn't see it right away. And it was 100 photos, and he wanted to increase it to 140. So it added about 20 or 30 more pages to it. And it's a really great thickness. It's perfect. And so, the number of pages and photos even got increased. And right now, it's my publisher's #1 seller. And also, they told me they're going to have to probably do a second run before Christmas, which is crazy. And also, it hit, a week before it came out, it hit #1 in travel photography on Amazon, hot new releases. And since then, I'm Googling, right? What does it take to be #1 in Amazon on new releases? And it said, take your screenshots because it changes hourly. So, of course, I took a screenshot, and it's been 5 weeks, and it's still #1. It's just crazy. So happy.
That's so amazing. I mean, when you started this thing, did you imagine that it could turn into what it's become, the tours and the book? And
No, not at all. And the thing I love about that is that it makes people happy, and that makes me happy, and it brings joy. And, we all need that right now. And also, I've had people call me on the phone, say to me, "I just got your book, so-and-so sent it to me as a gift, and I didn't even know I needed this right now, but I need this right now." So I don't know, it's such a great way to connect with people, and I'm really happy that I can do that through this.
how hard was it to narrow down the photos that you sent the publisher from the thousands to the hundreds?
Um, Actually, they did all of that and then presented it to me. And have you seen the book yet?
I've not seen the book. I've seen the cover.
When you see the book, you'll realize that they did such a cool job of pairing. I mean, it's most every page is 2 photos, one door on each side, except for there's 10 stories of 10 iconic doors and there's only one. But on the pages where there's two, which is the majority of the book, they did such a cool job of pairing them up either by color or by the shape of the door and what's happening in the surround. And so that kind of, and then also the goal was to get as many neighborhoods as possible in the book. So all of that kind of dictated which images were used. And I really didn't have to do any of that. I just looked at, I mean, I had some feedback, but, I just looked at what they presented to me. And they do such a beautiful job that they make stunning books. And it's one of the things when you hold it in your hand that everyone is saying, like, it's a stunning book. It really is. And it's just, quality is amazing. And so that was all them.
That's amazing. Did they also choose the photo that went on the cover, or did you get to choose that?
So they first had a different cover photo,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a beautiful photo, but it's down in Hyde Park, and it's in the fall, and there's all kinds of fall leaves around it. And it wouldn't have been my first choice for the cover, so I presented a couple other ones to them, and they ended up selecting one of the other ones, which is the doorway to the Driehaus Museum. And I'm really happy with that doorway. I would have been happy with either one. And I said to them too, like, you guys are the experts. You know what sells, and so we want it to sell. So whatever you think, but I really would like a different door.
You mentioned earlier you're now in the Fine Arts Building. How did you end up there? That's such a famous and beautiful building in Chicago.
Of course, I'm a vintage buff, anything, planes, trains, and automobiles, buildings. And I had heard about the Fine Arts Building, but had never been in it yet. And a couple of years ago, the building turned 125 years old, and they had a big celebration. And they had an influencer night, so I got invited to that in an email. And I said, oh, I'm going to that because I want to see that building. I came in and literally just mouth on the floor. I just remember going up to the 10th floor where the murals are, and like there's not a lot of activity on the 10th floor during, we have a second Fridays night once a month too, where there's open studio night. And, there's just not a lot of tenants up there that have their doors open. So it's pretty quiet up there. I was by myself and it was kind of dark and moody, which it is anyway. And I just said to myself, what is this place? It's got such an amazing aura to it.
Yeah.
And I just had goosebumps the whole night. And then it's just amazing doorways through the entire building too. And so I was just going like, this building is calling out to me. And so that was a Friday. And on Monday, I was on the phone asking about spaces. And so they had one space. It's about 98% full almost all the time. Most people go on a waiting list to get in. So they had the space that I'm in. And I just remember it's kind of tucked away back in the corner on the fourth floor. But with the way the buildings are, there's a parking lot. First of all, my studio has 12-foot ceilings and 10-foot high windows. So the light's incredible, and it faces west. And I can see the Sears Tower, I'm going to call it Sears, and the Board of Trade, and I can see the Fisher Building, and they're all layered in my view. And it's just spectacular. And then I also have I love trains, so I have this CTA train going by every 5 minutes. And it's just so Chicago. And I wrote back to them and said, I'll take it. And the girl was like, this is the fastest anyone's ever responded.
Oh, God.
I go, well, I've heard. You got to jump. And I had no plan, absolutely no plan. I remember talking to a friend of mine saying I was considering this, and I had already started drawing the layouts because I'm an interior designer, so I had the space drawn up and seeing how much furniture I could fit in, etc. And she looked at me and she goes, you have to do this. So it was kind of the thing that pushed me over the edge. And yeah, it's been great. I mean, the book largely came around. I mean, I feel like I have to have good content to have a book anyway, but the book came around about largely from being in the building.
I won't ask you what your favorite doorway is, but where would you, like, if you could recommend a doorway or doorways where people should go looking for doorways, what would you tell them?
I have several that I could think of. One is the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge in Uptown. It's just so Chicago and it's so iconic and it's so like mid-century. I think it was a little bit earlier than mid-century, but the sign is the vintage. I love vintage neon signs too, so that's in a lot. And then a lot of doorways have vintage neon signs above them, so uh, that one is just really special. And the day I took that photo, the sunlight reflected on all the little theater lights, which are down on the door, shadows, and also the shadows of the neon tubing is really cool in that photo. So that one's cool. Central Camera downtown here is another one with neon sign. An over 100-year-old business that's still there with a sign that's that old. Margie's Candies is another one. That one just really fun with the striped awnings and the red neon. And then the Driehaus Museum, of course. The cover of the book is that, but it's the lower doorway in that building. If you look at that whole facade of that building, it's got above the store, it's got two-story bronze doors that are patinaed into green, and they're Tiffany design doors. And so this is the doorway of the cover of the book's the doorway into the Driehaus basement. but it's just magnificent. And I remember seeing that door the first time too, because I worked at Bloomingdale's in the home store around the corner, and I would go out on my lunch breaks to take photos. And I remember walking by that, going, "What is that?" It stops you in your tracks. And then the story of how Chicago went from farmland to bustling city is literally carved in these doorways. So it's a developer bought this block. His name was Daniel Crilly, Crilly, and prior to that, where this location was farmland because the city limits ended at North Avenue when Chicago became incorporated. And Lincoln Park was a swamp, and this North Curly Court was a farm. And actually, there's a farmer on record. He's French, and his name was Charles Canda, and his farm was located right where North Curly Court is. He had a barn and house and some apple orchards, blah blah blah. He gets to retirement age and then passes away, and he leaves his property to half of it to his wife Adele, and then the other half went to his brother, whose name was Florimond. So Florimond Canda, the brother, was a general and fought in the Battle of Waterloo with Napoleon and Napoleon's wife, the French Empress Eugenie. So he knew them, of course, and Eugenie Street is actually named after the French Empress Eugenie, Napoleon's wife. And so after the war, he moves back to Chicago to be near his brother. Brother passes away, leaves half his property to him. And so he ends up, living probably, I don't know, like the exact story, who knows it. He probably lived, close by. And he gets to be retirement age, and he sells the property to this developer, Daniel Crilly. This is right in the late 1800s when the huge housing boom was happening because Chicago was growing so fast. And so there's four doors that face to the west, and they're the names of Daniel Crilly's four children: Isabel, Erminie, Oliver, and Edgar. And then there's a door on the south side of the building that says Eugenie. And then there's a door on the north side of the building that says Florimond. So this story is just literally carved into the names of these doors, and those are really, really fun. And I remember seeing those for the first time going, also, what the hell is that? Why are there names above these doors? So it's just so fun to see them and photograph them, and then to take to actually find the history.
It's hard to imagine, like when you're describing that. I live in Wicker Park, and so it's hard to imagine that the city stopped at North Avenue and then it was just more country. Like it is like, I'm just closing my eyes, like, what was that like,
Right.
Okay, we are almost at the end of our time, which is unbelievable because this has flown by. But the thing we like to ask at the end of every episode is, when people come visit Chicago, what are the things you tell them they have to do?
Oh man, they have to take a tour by Doorways of Chicago.
Great.
That's an absolute must. But really, I mean, I think walking the river, I love how we have our river walk now. It's just really a must do. Millennium Park and Grant Park, and then also walking along our, the lake shore. Just we've got that amazing 20-mile path, walking and biking, and then just make sure like visiting neighborhoods, not just staying downtown, because like I said before, it's really the fabric of our city. Chinatown, Wicker Park, Garfield Park. I mean, it's so amazing. Pullman, the whole history of the train, George Pullman and what happened with Victorian trains is just, I mean, the rabbit holes you can go down just researching this stuff is just unbelievable. I love going down rabbit holes. Like I said, it's one of my meditations too. So I can sit and get lost for 3 hours reading about stuff, and then go, "Wow, that was fun."
All right, Ronnie, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for spending the time. It was great to talk to you. This is so interesting. Everyone buy the book.
Yeah, make sure you get it on my website. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon too if you want, but support the artists.
Yeah, support the artist. All right, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Notes from Chicago. This podcast is edited and produced by Tanisha Blakely. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Notes from Chicago on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.